Hi everyone, it's JJ here and welcome to Be Colorful. Today I will share with you 4 wedding cards inspired by the 4 seasons. For this series of cards I will show you the techniques to create beautiful borders for your card without using special dies for borders, but using, for example, dies in the shape of leaf, butterfly or flower, which I almost sure every card maker who has a die cutting machine owns at least one. Well, let's move on to the first card. Autumn, the grape harvest seasons, where the penetrating scent of most of the grape prevails in the countryside. Many future spouses choose as the theme of their wedding the nectar of the gods. Therefore, this card will contain elements such as wine and vine leaves. First of all, I will create my card base on Ivory cardstock in a standard size that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. Now let's move on to creating the decorative border. In this case I will use a vine leaf shaped die, which is probably maple, but they look similar. And I gonna die cut directly on the card base, even if later I will change my mind and I will cut out a panel. To create the border, I will perform a series of partial die cut, so I mark a pencil line that will show me, more or less, where to align the plate of the die cutting machine. On the bottom plate of my big shot, I temporarily fix the card with low stick tape, as well as the die. Now I'm gonna place the upper plate on the top of the die, aligning its edge with the line I drew with the pencil. In this way, only the lower part of the leaf will be die cut. I continue to create the border by repositioning the die and making partial die cutting, as I did for the first leaf. I repeat this process for the entire length of the card. After the die cutting, as you can see, some pieces remained together, so with a precision craft knife I'll remove the excesses and finish some edges. Of course, there are some imprecisions, minor in my opinion. However, in the course of the video, I will show you how to hide them. In this case, for example, I will decorate the border with the leaves themselves, hiding those excess cut. Using the same ivory cardstock, I have die cut 4 leaves, which I will glue exactly over the border shape. Before doing this, however, I will embellish the leaves using the coordinated stamp of the set that stamp the veins. And here I will show you a technique that will allow you to stamp the same image several times over the coordinated die cut in an easy, fast and, above all, precise way. To perform this technique, you need a stamping platform and the negative part of the die cut. I blocked the paper with a magnet and I put one of the leaves inside the template. Place the coordinated stamp on top of the leaf, naturally with the surface to be stamping facing down. And once aligned properly, I close the stamping platform. The stamp, which now adheres to the transparent door, will remain in the same position, allowing me to make multiple identical prints, changing from time to time only the leaf. I will do a hot embossing technique with gold powder, so I'm going to dab the stamp with the Versamark ink. I close the door and print. I'm gonna place another leaf in the same shape and I'm going to stamp. Same position, identical stamped. This technique is useful for multiple stamps if, for example, you need to reproduce many identical elements for invitations or Christmas card for a very large family. Once all the leaves are stamped, I sprinkle them with gold embossing powder. I remove the excess powder from the leaves and I put it inside the jar. Then I'm gonna melt the embossing powder with my heat gun. Now I can glue the leaves, aligning them to the border. Let's move on to the focal point. I don't have wine-themed stamps or dies, so I printed two wine glasses silhouette. You can find the image on my blog. And I gonna cut out the two glasses. I try to do my best to cut nice and straight, but I don't really mind because I will do an embossing technique on these two elements as well, so the small imperfections will not be visible. So with my Versamark ink, I dab the entire surface of the glasses. I'm going to sprinkle them with the same gold embossing powder that I used for the leaf veins and melt it with the embosser. And these beautiful golden glasses are ready. Here I decided to create a separate panel simply by cutting the card base in half. Now I'm gonna create a window with a label die on what has now become my basic panel. With this same die and another of the same shape but slightly larger, I will create a frame for the window. I align the two dies, placing the smaller one inside the larger one. And I'm going to die cut under Aria's supervision. Frame approved. Also on the frame, I'm gonna do a hot embossing technique with the gold powder again. I'm gonna glue the frame by aligning the inner edges with those of the window on the panel. Before gluing everything onto the card base, which I have always recreated on ivory cardstock and in standard sizes, I'm going to create a background for the border sleeves using this beautiful gold paper with an embossed texture. I'm going to cut out a strip of this specialty card and I'm gonna glue it directly on the card base. To create a dimension, I'm going to glue my main panel with some foam tape. I had decided to decorate the card with a dark chocolate satin ribbon to break up the gold and ivory that would otherwise be too excessive, in my opinion. Obviously, I forgot about it. It would have been better to glue it before putting on the foam tape, but never mind. I'm using a double-sided tape to keep the ribbon in place. I fold the ends inward and stick them on the foam tape. Then I will glue the main panel on the card base. With some liquid glue, I'm going to glue the wine glasses inside the window. Let's move on to the sentiment, for which I will do a golden hit emboss technique of the word congratulations on Ivory cardstock. I'm going to cut out the cardstock to make a sentiment strip. And I'm going to create the finishing border for my sentiment strip using the same gold specialty card I used for the background before. Finally, I glue it to the card with some dimensional tape. We have come to the final details. I will glue some gold sequins here and there, ending the card for the autumn wedding. Winter. It is not the most popular month for a wedding, but if you choose a theme inspired by this season, ranging from rustic with pine cones, hollies, deer, and elements of the winter forest, to a more sophisticated and elegant theme with candy snow white and the crystalline blue of the eyes, I believe that a winter wedding can be a perfect fairy tale and magical wedding. For this card I will go for the iced theme and I will create my DIY border using these snowflakes dyes by Sizzix. Of course, if you don't have a wedding for the winter, you can turn this card for Christmas greetings. First of all, I'm going to create my main panel, which will be 4¼ by 5½, using the 300 GSM Ivory cardstock again. As before, I'm going to draw a pencil line that will show me where to place the top plate of the big shot. Now I place the first snowflakes, temporarily blocking it with some low stick tape. I then proceed to partially die cut the paper, aligning the upper plate of the big shot with the line marked with the pencil. And I got the first partial die cut. I proceed to create the whole border with the same method. As you can see, some parts were not die cut well, so I separate the two pieces of cardstock using the precision cutter. Once the border has been created, I'm going to erase the pencil line and prepare my card base, again on ivory cardstock. As a background for the border, I will use this gorgeous cotton paper that resembles small ice crystals. I'm going to cut out a strip of this paper large enough to cover the portion of the card base visible under the snowflakes border. I'm going to glue it directly to the top of the card base using some liquid glue. And I'm going to cut out the excesses. Now, with some foam tape to give a nice dimension, I'm going to glue the panel on the card base by positioning the border upward. With some silver mirror cardstock, I will create a very thin strip to decorate the border of the snowflakes, also hiding any imperfections due to the partial die cut. Let's now pass to the sentiment. With the Versamark ink, I will stamp congratulations on ivory cardstock. I will perform a hot embossing with silver glitter powder. I'm going to cut out the sentiment by making a strip, and then I'm going to cut out the two ends making fishtails. As usual, I add some very thin borders all around the sentiment strip using the silver mirror card. I'm gonna glue the sentiment using some foam pad. As a finishing touches, I will glue some light blue sequins that match the cotton paper. Finally, I apply glitter on the snowflakes with the Nuvo Shimmer pen to give a final touch of magic to a card for a fairy tale winter wedding. Ah, spring, delicate poetics, mild days, perfumes, blooming flowers, the perfect season for weddings. In fact, we say May is the month of brides. Surely the most common colors for spring weddings are pink shade, lilacs, pastel colors, for a delicate bride who wants to feel like a real princess. So for this card I will make a floral border using in fact a flower shaped die and the coordinated stamp. If you don't have any stamps with a matching die, you can simply stamp and then cut out by hand following the edges. In this case, in addition to the partial die cut, I will also show you a stamping technique that involves the use of mask to create an image with the figures on various levels. Obviously, it's easier to show you the process. So let's start. For this card too, I will use Ivory cardstock. I get a main panel which will be 4¼ by 5½. Then I start with the stamps. I will stamp first the flowers positioned on the front layer, while those placed on the back I will stamp them later using the masks. Let's proceed and you will see that it will be clearer. I'm using a stamping platform because the ink pad I chose does not print perfectly on the first stamp, so I need to print several times in the same position. I take advantage of the fact that the ink is still wet and quickly do a hot embossing with a clear embossing powder, creating a glossy embossed finish. Remember to clean the stamp before stamping the next flower. I continue to stamp the flower on the front layer. Now let's put the masking technique into practice. To make the third flower behind the other two, I'm going to put masks to cover the flowers already stamped. I made this mask by cut out pieces of paper with the matching die. If you use stamps without a matching die, you can print your stamp on a piece of paper and cut it out by hand following the borders. Now I'm going to remove the masks, and as you can see the third flower is on the back. I continue to create the floral border using the masking technique to cover up the flowers on the top layer. My border is ready, so I proceed with the partial die cut as with the previous card. I'd like just let you know that in this case it is possible to cut by hand following the edges or leaving a white margin to facilitate the fuzzy cutting. So I'm going to position the die and align it well on the first flower. Then I place the upper plate only of the portion of the flower that I want to die cut. I proceed in the same way for all the flowers. Once the die cuts are finished, I'm going to separate any pieces of paper that have remained joined with a precision knife. As a background for my border, this time I choose a pearlescent pink paper. Also, I will do a similar design to the first card, therefore I will create a window with the same dye. And I'm gonna create a frame on the pearlescent paper with the same two dyes I used for the first card. I'm going to glue the frame onto the window. Then I'm going to cut out a strip of the pearlescent paper to make the border background, gluing it directly onto the bottom of my card base, which is a horizontal landscape in a standard size 4¼ by 5½. Before gluing everything down, I'm going to stamp the sentiment inside the window. I'm using the same ink I used for the flowers and stamp directly on the card base a set of words with different fonts, and I will compose the phrase "on your wedding day." As for the flowers, I take advantage of the still wet ink to emboss with the clear embossing powder. After stamping the sentiment, I'm going to cut out a very thin strip of pink satin paper to decorate the card. With the same paper, I have cut out a few hearts that will be my finishing touches. I'm gonna glue the main panel on the card base with some foam tape. I'm going to glue the heart inside the window. Finally, I'm adding some pink crystal drop to the center of the flowers, thus finishing the card for a sweet spring wedding. Hot summer, I live deep colors, weddings on the beach with the colors of the sea or on green gardens with the room filled with bright sunflowers. Many couples choose this combination of contrasting colors, the yellow of the sunflowers and the blue of the sea. And this will be the theme of my card. First of all, I cut out the main panel, again on ivory cardstock and in a standard size, that's 4¼ by 5½. I will create the DIY border using this die set. On particular, I will use two of these flowers that look like sunflowers. As before, I draw a pencil line that will show me where to place the top plate of the big shot. I'm going to place the first flower and the plate covering only the portion of the flower that I want to die cut. I'm going to place the second flower, which in this case is slightly smaller than the other, and I proceed in the same way by die cutting along the entire length of the panel, creating the entire border. Now with my precision craft knife that have remained attached. I will decorate the border of this card with the flowers. Die cut them on this yellow paper. I'm going to die cut one for each edge shape, especially 3 small and 2 large. Then I'm going to glue all the flowers on their respective border shapes, putting the glue only in the center of the flowers. Let's remember to erase the pencil line. After gluing all the flowers, I slightly round the petals by curving them with the paper folder or adding opal to give dimension to the flowers. Then I'm gonna choose the paper for the border background. You can go with the blues, or with the greens. Or even with the browns. Or you can go for a more rustic look using Hessian. For this card I will stay on the yellow-blue contrast using this particular embossed card. Therefore, on my card base, a portrait top folding card in a standard size that's 4¼ by 5½, I'm going to glue the border background strip. I also create a thinner border on the left of the card, always with the same blue paper. As a sentiment, I'm going to print "Congratulations" on a strip of ivory cardstock using the Versamark ink, and then perform the hot embossing using a gold powder. Since I introduced the gold color for sentiment, I want other point on the card to have the same color, to bring everything together. So I smear the flowers with the Versamark ink to it embossing them with the same golden powder. Returning to the sentiment, after having cut it out to obtain a strip with the right hand cut at an angle, I add the finishing borders using the blue paper, which moreover help the sentiment to stand out even more. Next, I'm going to glue the sentiment to the left side of the main panel using some foam tape. Still with some foam tape, I'm going to stick the main panel on the card base. To embellish my card even more, I'm going to glue a cascade of blue heart-shaped confetti. Finally, I create the center of the flowers by making huge drops with a metallic brown crystal drop, thus completing the card for a summer wedding. Well, the video ends here. I hope I gave you some ideas to use your dies to create beautiful and unique decorative borders, and some ideas to create your wedding card. Leave me a like if you like the video and tell me in the comment which one is your favorite card and in which season did you get married or you'd like get married. If you have organized or will organize a wedding inspired by season. I think I will opt for autumn or spring, even if I think that the winter is very magic, but it's too cold for me. So thanks to join with me today, see you next time and be colorful!